Welcome to the top 5 hockey mysteries that were finally solved. In over 145 years of hockey, there's been many leagues, strange players, and oddities that are out of this world. From the female Wayne Gretzky to the dead body that haunted a team for over a decade, let's get right into this video. Number 5. Superwoman. When someone is a one-woman show that is single-handedly keeping an arena's business alive, she must be something special. Albertine Lapansée laced up her skates for the Cornwall Victorias. The stats from the 1916 season shows how special she really was. In 46 games, the Victorias won 45 of them and tied 1, so they were technically undefeated. The Victorias scored 228 goals, which is just shy of 5 goals per game. They only let in 29 goals, so if the Victorias had just one goalie during that season, which they commonly did, that goalie would have a goals against average of 0.63, and the team's goal differential would be 199. They also recorded 16 shutouts. That team sounds amazing. So how did Lapansée do? She scored 150 goals, 3.26 goals per game, which is 2/3 of the team's total goals. Just think about how many points she would have if assists were a recorded stat. With her dominating, she wanted a cut of the revenue from the arena, but they declined. After that, Albertine walked away from the game. Now that's when the questions and mysteries arose. How was Albertine Lapansée that good? She had to be a man that was dressed up as a woman. After walking away from the game, she disappeared from the media, and no one knew where she was or what she was up to. There are some people that thought she was born a man. There's other people that thought that when she turned away from hockey, she had a sex change to be a man named Albert. Well, where is she now? She must have died in the 1980 Spanish flu pandemic. Well, I have all the answers. So why was she so good? First of all, she was playing ever since she was a little girl, so it's possible that she had way more experience than the other girls. Not only that, but she played with her older brothers and their friends as a kid. Playing with older people would have helped her game out tremendously. So what happened to her? Did she die? Let's start off easy and confirm her gender. According to the Canadian census, Albertine Lapansée's mother listed Albertine as her daughter, so that's proof that she wasn't born a guy. Well, how about the sex change? After the supposed sex change, her mother still listed her as a female on the Canadian census, and plus, the first sex change happened after Albertine's supposed sex change. More evidence is that there's a profile done on her family in the 1940s listing her as Albert Schmidt and still listed as a girl. To clear up confusion, Albert is likely short for Albertine, and the change to her last name is because she married a man, coincidentally named Albert. So she's a girl, never got a sex change, and after hockey, she decided to have a normal life and got married. Number 4, Ghost in the Cup. Not only was this situation mysterious, but the whole thing was wild. In 1951, Game 5 marked the 5th straight overtime in the series of Toronto versus the Montreal Canadiens. Toronto leads 3-1. Bill Barilko, Toronto's defenseman, was threatened by coach Joe Primo with a $500 fine if he makes any offensive plays in overtime. So Bill Barilko did the logical thing and made an offensive play. That play would knock the puck in the net and win the Stanley Cup. This goal would be Bill's first and only overtime goal in his career. Not only did Bill score the last goal of the playoffs, but he reportedly also scored the first one. The team was ecstatic and lifted Bill Barilko on their shoulders like a cliche movie. Coach Primo also rushed on the ice and said, "Forget about the fine." This would be Toronto's 4th cup in 5 years. Truly a dynasty in the making. In the summer after winning the Stanley Cup, Bill went on a fishing trip by plane to Quebec. Bill and his mother had a dispute before he left. The plane was to leave Friday. Mrs. Barilko lost her lover 5 years prior on a Friday, so it was a superstition. Bill laughed it off, and his mother was furious. She didn't even kiss him goodbye. The plane never made it to the destination. There was a huge organized search that involved the Royal Canadian Air Force. After 2 months, the cost of the search was already $385,000, $3.7 million today, which was the military's most expensive search at the time. The next season, Toronto got swept in the semifinals against Detroit. Toronto would lose the season after, too. Toronto would just keep losing. Where was Bill Barilko? How was he not found? Is Toronto losing due to the Bill Barilko curse? On April 22nd, 1962, 11 years after Game 6 of the Stanley Cup Finals to win the Stanley Cup, just over a month later, 75 kilometers north of Cochrane, Ontario, Bill Barilko's skeleton was found, still strapped into his seat. The curse was lifted. Toronto won the next 2 years and won again in 1967. Was the Bill Barilko curse real? Please let me know. Number 3. Is Conn dead? Born Constantine Smythe, the name shortened to Conn when he was at the age of 12. The name Conn means hero of 1,000 battles, and he'll really live up to that. A week after winning the Ontario Hockey Association Junior Championships with the Varsity Blues while attending the University of Toronto in 1915, Conn Smythe and 8 of his teammates were enlisted in the World War I. Conn saw action with the Canadian Artillery. On March 15, 1917, Conn earned the Military Cross for acts of valor. In July of 1917, Conn's plane was shot down by the Germans and his body was never recovered. Conn Smythe was missing for 14 months. There was no sign of Conn and he was presumed dead. But in reality, Conn was very much alive, captured by the Germans, and held prisoner of war. He tried to escape twice, but to no avail. Conn Smythe would later become president of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and his legacy will continue with the Conn Smythe Trophy, which is given to the playoff MVP. Conn Smythe is in the Hall of Fame under the Builder category. Conn Smythe changed the name from the St. Pat's to the Maple Leafs to honor soldiers who fought in the war. Number 2, who is on this card? You probably think it's simple. It's Bryan Maxwell. Well, it has his name, but not his face. Ken Reid called Bryan Maxwell about the aforementioned card for his book, Hockey Card Stories, and in that call, Bryan admitted that it wasn't him. Ken asked, well, who is it? And Bryan admitted to not know. Years later, Ken posted on his Instagram about the card asking if anyone had any information on who it was. Several former WHA players contacted Ken saying that it was Ron Plum. Ron did play for the Stingers and looked like the guy on the card, but it wasn't him. Ken called Ron Plum, and another dead end came when it was discovered that it wasn't him either. Ken wasn't done with his detective skills, and he contacted the Hockey Hall of Fame. Craig Campbell helped by contacting a former Cleveland Crusaders photographer who still had that very same picture in his files. The mystery was finally revealed. The mystery man's name is Mike Bartley. Mike Bartley found out about the card on his 70th birthday. For over 40 years, he had no idea he had his own hockey card. Who knows? Maybe you are currently on a hockey card. Number 1. Where is the cup? The Stanley Cup isn't just the oldest trophy in the sport of hockey, but it is also the most iconic. Over the 130 years of its existence, it should have a story or two to go along with it. This entry just doesn't have one story attached to it. The reason is that the Stanley Cup managed to go missing several times. How is that possible? The first time, it didn't really go missing, but it could have ended up a lot worse. The Silver Seven kicked it into the Rideau Canal. It was just a small bowl back then. They tried to kick it over the canal, but with their drunken state, they kicked it into the canal. But it was too dark to find it, so they left, and they went to retrieve it in the morning. And luckily, it was still floating on the canal. After the Montreal Canadiens' 1924 Stanley Cup win, a couple of players were driving to a victory party when they got a flat. They removed the Stanley Cup out of their trunk to retrieve a spare tire, and they left the beloved cup on a snowbank. They didn't realize that they left it there until they got to the party, and they had to retrace their steps. The 1962 Stanley Cup Finals was between the Chicago Blackhawks and the Montreal Canadiens. The cup was held in a glass case at the Chicago Stadium lobby. With no one securing it and no alarms going off upon opening it, a Montreal fan just snuck in and walked out with the Stanley Cup. A police officer caught the man and asked why he took the cup, and the fan said to take it back where it belongs, to Montreal. After the 1962 playoffs, the cup rested on display at the Hockey Hall of Fame, and the championship trophy was replaced with a new one. The Stanley Cup was stolen from the Hall of Fame, and it was missing for the longest time to date. After 7 years of searching, the police got an anonymous tip to check the back of a cleaning store in Toronto. What do they find? A body? A missing person? They found the missing Stanley Cup. We heard about fans stealing the Stanley Cup, but how about players on the winning team? After the 1979 Stanley Cup win, Guy Lafleur decided to steal the Stanley Cup and take it to his hometown as a joke. Some people found it humorous, but the people whose job to protect the cup didn't find it that funny.